Everything great.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are back for another episode of DCA. Definitely a softer market again. We had a little bit of a sell-off last week, which has accelerated over the last 7 days. We're coming in here at Bitcoin just above 61K, Solana just below 130, and ETH just hanging out above 3,300. So a decent move lower, let's say 5 to 15% lower kind of across the board there for some of the majors. How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing in this sell-off?
Good. As you know, I've been worried about the carry trade. You and I have been going back and forth for 2 weeks now. And now we got, yet again, Mt. Gox rattling the market. And it's like one of those records on infinite repeat over and over again. The news comes out, oh, Mt. Gox is going to sell. Everybody freaks out. Price tanks. I think the two big things for me are, one, we've got the 200-day moving average around 58,000, and we have the short-term holder realized cost base, which we broke during a bull market, which is not a good sign. So we're now about $2,000 below that. But that being said, it's surprising how some of the alts are holding up. I had a few on my shopping list, and they didn't dip at all. So very, very bizarre. And Solana is where it was on Friday. It's actually a little bit higher. So certain things are not impacted by this Mt. Gox stuff, but it is big, and we'll dig more into that later. So that's kind of my view of the world right now.
Optimistic. That's good to hear. What about you?
Not optimistic. We kind of knew Bitcoin had a chance of taking a dump, and it did just that. It was just too many headwinds versus tailwinds right now, and breaking that support. Like, we are teetering on the brink. I did a video a few days ago called teetering on the brink, and literally we broke through the brink. So we'll see.
What about you, CTO? How are the charts feeling to you? Is this a buy the dip sort of day for you feel?
Yeah, can I show the chart here? I think it is pretty clear. Is it showing up? Yes. So I think this got really clear, and we've talked about it on the past shows. The key resistance was this one, 71,400. And the key support, as we have talked about, was 60,800. That we hit exactly today. So the key event was really this minor level here. Maybe I'll try to zoom in a little bit, see if you see. That was the level we talked about a little over a week ago. That held so many times. I think it was 8 times on 8 different days. And then it broke down. Retested here, retested twice on the wrong side, like on the underside. And here I said that the major support is in play. So that's the 60,800. And today we hit it. So this is not really a surprising price action following last week's events. But as you can all see here now, what happens now is really key. This is what will determine, I think, the bigger direction for Bitcoin. If this holds here, if this major support holds and kind of bounces up again, back up something like this, then this looks fantastic suddenly. Then we have basically, then we get the inverse head and shoulder. We don't have an inverse head and shoulder yet. That's just speculation. But if it bounces and starts moving up, this is going to look fantastic, guys. But if we break this support, I think that, perhaps we could get something similar to this, some sort of fake out. But the bigger level, looking at both the price action and the volume profile, is down here then at 51,800 maybe. So if we break this, I think we might get chances for these levels, but we haven't broken yet. Support hit exactly and reacted back. So I'm very excited here, actually. If we get signs of this holding, this will be the best entries we could hope for. But I think it's a little too early to say during today. If someone is more risky, you could buy at support here and then cut it if it breaks. And if you want to take it a little bit more carefully, you could wait and see if it holds first and then kind of enter. So that's how I see it.
It's a good description of what happened. We had that band. We were bouncing between 61 66 and 71K, let's say 71.5. We bounced there a few times and then we broke below that 66K level. The next support was around 60K. We've gone there and now we see if that holds. We in crypto, this is known as the McDonald's candle potentially. If this now breaks down below that 60 level, but then you could get an inverse head and shoulders like you said. So technically, this is a very pivotal moment. It's a good time for us to go live. James, you touched on kind of the flows behind this a little bit, and we'll go into a bit more detail about that now. So what we have heard over the last week is, I would say, three major pieces of flows. We had, firstly, the German government had around 3 billion of Bitcoin, which they confiscated from an illegal website. They started to sell 50 to 150 million clips daily in the middle of last week. Then you had Saylor come in and buy around $750 million of Bitcoin. And then today, we heard that the Mt. Gox distributions are most likely to start in July. Now, to give a bit of context there, this is something that has been a known in crypto for a long time. Mt. Gox was the biggest crypto exchange around 10 years ago and went under, and they have around 9 billion of Bitcoin. This is slightly different than the FTX situation. When FTX went under, it sold all of its assets. Here, the assets are actually going to be redistributed. So they don't automatically get sold, but we will see around 9 billion of Bitcoin get returned to depositors on that exchange. They said that these distributions would be finished by Q3. It looks like they're going to start from next month. What I would say about this is, again, it's been a very well telegraphed known in crypto for a long time. It has involved a ton of different banks and payment agents. You have to assume that thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people, probably had the heads up on this before this news actually happened. So part of me thinks that this has been well telegraphed. Maybe even the German government selling was well telegraphed. So you could say that all of this was well known in the market and we've already reacted to it. Or do you think that we still got some reaction to come? What do you think, James? How do you see flows going from here?
Well, it's interesting because and that's the thing about Bitcoin. It's kind of fits and starts. Tide comes in, tide comes out. It's all about the flows. We did have, you mentioned Michael Saylor. He snagged 12,000 Bitcoin last week. That's basically a month and a half of miner issuance, which is large. And then you have the alarmists out there in the world, Bitcoin therapist. I think he posted, somebody tagged me on something on Twitter that he said that Michael Dell is Mr. 100. And of course it's not. I don't believe that for a second. Michael Dell is very rich. He's the 14th richest man in the world, but he's not Mr. 100 for sure. But you never know. And then Eric Balchunas, he talks about how the Mt. Gox 9 billion dump is half of the inflows being negated in one shot. What Eric is missing is the people that are in Mt. Gox are the OGs for the longest time. If you look at the simple way to think about the Bitcoin space, 70% of Bitcoin is 4 to 5 million of it is lost. The rest are long-term holders that are holding this thing as insurance against the world going sideways. So I don't see, even if these OGs, they're the most likely to hold on to them. Yes, they may take some lifestyle chips on the way, but the majority, again, 50 to 70%, I believe, of the Mt. Gox will be held at the very least. So it's not like 9 billion is going to be dumped. And given some of the different market participants as well, everybody has their price. I have my price for this bull run where I nibble a bit, and everybody else does too. There's a lot of people that missed the train because it's been all ETFs. And then we have another angle as well, not just Saylor buying, but of course more of the fear out there. I have another slide. They are Metaplanet, Dylan LeClaire. I think Dylan LeClaire is an advisor or working for the company right now, Metaplanet. They're snagging. You got a company called Semler in California. They are adding treasuries as well. And everybody's following the MicroStrategy playbook. Michael Dell personally is probably already invested in Bitcoin. his company may add some to the balance sheet too. This will overcome a lot of the fear right now. And it was actually interesting because when you look at the chart, in fact, CTO, maybe you can talk to this too. When the initial fear comes out, like these salacious headlines like this, everybody freaks out. But then the price rebounds very quickly. And we're seeing that happen right now. Not exactly rebounding, but 61.6, we fell to, what do we fall to? 60,600 today, 600 away from kind of my target yesterday. And that's pretty close. So it's again, it's being bought up, and now we are pretty much down. Of course, we're down $1,800, but we're off the floor. So again, there's people buying, there's people selling. Mt. Gox, we've been hearing about this for how long? 10 years now. It's just, again, infinite repeat record. I don't think it's going to crash the market at all.
Yeah, that's my view as well to a certain extent. I would say that a lot of this will have been well known. There was some takes today from people being like, well, this is going to lead to a huge amount of selling. We're going to go so much lower. I would say that a lot of people would have known about this happening particularly so soon. It was already known that it would happen in the next 3 months, but the idea that it would happen from next month, I think has probably been well telegraphed. So I lean towards this being backward looking information, and that the reason why we didn't get such strong reactions to the macro bounce that we've been seeing, and also all the good news that has been baked in over the last few months, is probably because people knew these distributions were going to be happening in July, and potentially even the German government was going to come in and sell 3 billion. So part of me wants to lean on the idea this is backward-looking information. And I also agree with what CTO is saying, in that 60K also looks like a bit of a battlefield. We're going to see, I imagine, at least some form of a bounce around this sort of level. And then we'll have to decide. Like, you don't just smash through 60K, in my opinion. It's been tested so many different times, and I think we're going to see it chop around this level for a little bit, whatever happens. What do you think, CTO? Do you still think we're going to have a decent period of does this news make you bearish on the market? Or do you think it's kind of probably already baked into the price? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the chart there, we kind of see what people have actually done and not just what they are talking about, because usually that's not the same thing. The rejections happened, what is it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? And this support breakdown that was actually really key, this was 13th of June. So, I mean, if these news are explaining this price behavior, that didn't happen today. That happened 2 weeks ago. And I mean, perhaps, I don't know, it could be that some people knew about it and took action. And now then, when the news is actually out, perhaps those larger players have already taken that action. So sometimes, like when the news comes out, it's late already. That's the wrong time to react on it. The bigger players perhaps knew this 2 weeks ago. Don't know.
Yeah.
Also, this whole thing with the Mt. Gox, I don't know how many times we've seen this, that Mt. Gox distribution is coming in 1 month. I mean, I wasn't here in this industry 10 years ago, but I think it's almost that length of time. And at least every single year that I've been involved in crypto, there has been Mt. Gox distribution is coming now and will crash the prices. I have no idea if it's going to happen this time. Seems like people are more convinced, but so they were last year. So let's see. And like James said, it will not be that everyone take these 9 billion worth of Bitcoin and dump them on the market immediately. Who knows how much? There will be some selling, right? People couldn't sell this before. If they get the distribution, for sure, a part of it will be sold. But how much? I don't know. But I don't know, it's not going to be 100% for sure.
Yeah.
10%, 50%, no idea, but it will not be 100%. Absolutely not. Also, there's a lot of, I don't know if it's if it's like a taxable event getting this distribution, probably not. So that means that if they sell it, they realize huge capital gains tax. But I mean, there will be some selling definitely when it's actually distributed.
Yeah.
But
In fact,
I couldn't read anyone saying that it will be 9 billion distributed in Bitcoin in 1 month. I saw something that they will start distribution or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, just to go into that slightly, James, you've obviously brought this up, but they've had plenty of false starts on this. So who knows how long this will actually take to fully distribute.
Yep. And you said a very important point, actually, CTO. I forgot to mention the taxes. The cost basis for this Bitcoin that's recovered, and only 15% is recovered, is extremely low. So if they sell when they get distributed, they've got a massive tax liability. And when people are faced with a massive tax liability, they need to take their time and figure stuff out and talk to their accountants. Imagine you've got a big bag of Bitcoin here because the number of creditors is not that high. So everybody, the average payout will be in the millions of dollars probably at a very low cost basis. So people will need time to think and plan, and they're not going to get their holdings and just dump it immediately. So this is why it's just overreaction to the news, in my opinion.
Yeah, actually, I know someone I've met in Portugal who's set to kind of get a huge distribution from this, let's say in the millions, but he doesn't know how much it even is. Like he is got the actual communication from Mt. Gox to holders here has been very difficult. It's often the releases are often in Japanese and through various different payment agents. So he literally has no idea how much Bitcoin he's getting. He thinks he's getting a certain high amount, but he has no idea. And he also knows there's going to be a massive tax implication. So just trying to put people's understanding that everyone's kind of in the dark about what they're even getting. It seems
exactly.
like.
And if your friend had 100 Bitcoin in there, he's getting 15 back. That's the ballpark number. So tell him he's not getting his 100 back. He probably already knows.
No, he knows he was getting something like a 20% recovery, but it's still he has no idea the exact amount. And over this process, they've been asked at certain times, do they want a cash distribution or a Bitcoin distribution for part of it or not part of it? And again, it's all in Japanese. It's it's been very, very messy because again, they've had a number of different false starts. So he doesn't actually know. Anyway, we'll go on to the next topic, which is this just all noise? Should we be paying attention to global liquidity, M2 growth? There was a very, very popular chart which Delphi Research put out a few days ago, which basically just pointed to the fact that Bitcoin has been tracking M2 global money supply over the last few months pretty perfectly, and this has just corresponded to a slight dip in M2 money supply. This is before a period where we have 10 of the top 11 central banks set to cut rates in the second half of this year. You obviously have easing programs starting particularly in Asia, but also potentially even around the world. Do you think this is just all noise? Cowbell, as Raoul Pal likes to call it, is about to get switched back on, and we are about to go back up. And Bitcoin will go back up naturally with global liquidity. What's your view on this, James?
Yeah, stealth QE has been happening since nearly a year and a half since the American banking crisis. The Chinese are printing money like crazy to try and bail out the property market, which is in the toilet. ECB, their M3, if I'm not mistaken, and M2 has not been curtailed like in the US. So global M2, what I like about this chart is it's on a 6-month delay. So it's back in time. It doesn't reflect the uptick that we've had. And I track global liquidity every single week. And it has been upticking. In fact, we added something like $650 billion in global liquidity since the beginning of June. And, people think June is a terrible month, but still, I think even the ETFs are still up fractionally so far in the month of June as well. I know the last 10 days, they've had some severe dumpage, but the previous 14 days before that, they had a positive inflow. So it's not the end of the world, everybody. This is just overreaction to the market and the unwinding of the carry trade. But this is coming in earnest for sure. And this will float all boats, as we say. And you can see the beautiful correlation here. The orange is the Bitcoin price and global M2 is blue, and they follow each other like almost perfectly nailed.
This is what I kind of looked at. I was like, this is just all noise. Like if you have a long-term approach here, global liquidity is going to go back up, particularly the second half of this year with all the different central banks. We could be on for one of the biggest periods of reduction in rates we've seen in decades here. With to put it in perspective, UK inflation hit 2%. rates are around 5% there. US inflation is around 3%, rates are at 5.5% there. EU inflation is just over 2%, or German inflation, and rates are 4.25% there. So rates are quite a bit higher than where inflation is. So we should be seeing a reduction in all of those major economies. There was another very good article from Arthur Hayes, which I know you read as well, CTO, which is pointing to what's going on in Japanese banks. And this might seem slightly detached from crypto, but it does actually have an important feedback loop. So there was a bank last week, I think it's called Norichuken Bank. Obviously, I don't speak Japanese, but they have said publicly they need to sell 63 billion of US treasuries. Now, the Japanese foreign currency holdings of treasuries is something in the hundreds of billions, if not trillions. It's kind of unclear between the retail and actually the Bank of Japan who owns them. But you are set to see huge selling of these US treasuries. Part of that is because of the increase in US rates meant their mark-to-market losses were very high. But also there's been a big move in the hedging of dollar yen, which means that basically the reason for holding those treasuries has been completely negated. It looks like one of the most obvious ways to stop this being a pain in the US Treasury market is for these bonds to be bought by the BOJ and then for them to use the FEMA repo facility to basically get back dollars. They would print dollars in receipt of those US Treasuries. So this could mean massive easing to the tune of tens, hundreds of billions if this is done, and it would be stealth. This would not be seen as something that people really pay attention to, but the pain in basically Japanese banks is very similar to the pain that we saw in regional banks in the US 18 months ago. It's just happened 18 months later, and the US similarly is going to have to do some form of stealth easing to kind of make sure these treasuries don't destroy the treasury market, because otherwise they'd have to go into the open market and sell tens, hundreds of billions worth of US treasuries. What did you make of this, CTO, this piece by Arthur Hayes?
Yes, I have it up here actually on the screen. And I think it was very interesting. It was very educational, by the way. This guy seems like, I think at first impression, everyone thinks he's some kind of clown, but he's actually very smart. And I think you should all learn it here. It's on his blog. Arthur Hayes. And his conclusion is exactly what you said, Mando. His conclusion is that the supply of dollars must increase to maintain the current setup, basically, because of all this. I mean, there is an element of speculation. He is speculating a little bit that perhaps Yellen could come up with some other solution, and he's saying he's thought a lot about what it could be, but he can't think of any other way to do this, to get out of this situation, because Yellen and company won't want that Japan goes and dumps these bonds on the open market. They don't want that. So they need to find a better solution. And that's his conclusion. That's what the solution would be. So absolutely, I think this is interesting. There is definitely a huge correlation between liquidity. It can be measured in M2 money supplies. There's many other measures, but there is a definite correlation that when liquidity goes up, Bitcoin price tends to go up. So if we can kind of somehow figure out that the liquidity will increase, yeah, that's like one more star on the positive side for Bitcoin price. Absolutely. So many times I think about this as like a scoreboard, and it has been rather successful over these years, that we have many ways to kind of clues to figure out what will happen. One is like, does support hold or not? Are we keep breaking support? Is the trend up or is it trend down? That's another key event, because trends in technology and Bitcoin tend to be very sticky. So once they have gotten into uptrend, it takes a lot to change it. And the same in the downtrend. And then things like liquidity. Do we see that liquidity will increase going forward? Which isn't just guesses. That's like educational guesses you can at least do about that. Okay, that's another plus sign here. And so far, I mean, it's still, even though I'm sure people are very upset, the price is down and sad and so on, but today, as of this date, it kind of looks pretty good. I would say it looks much better than last week, where support had just broken and we retested on the wrong side. Now support held, the trend hasn't turned down. We have some of the bad news is out now already. Liquidity perhaps is going to turn back up. I think it looks better than it did last week. But then we have to be nimble. If this breaks now, if this support breaks, retest on the wrong side, on the underside, okay, this would be a different situation than the one we have right now. But we're not there yet. So yeah.
So let's go into what is upcoming really for the market. And I think the before we actually get into the good news for Solana, we'll go into ETH first. So in the next week, potentially 8 days, is what Bloomberg predicts, we will see spot ETH ETFs. This is now seemingly a pretty seminal moment for the market where we're at. Again, particularly if we hang around this sort of level of support. There's been a wide range of estimates here. Will it beat expectations, meet expectations, fall against expectations? There's a lot of different variables here with respect to the Grayscale ETH position, which will probably move to the other ETFs, and a lot of different predictions about whether the TradFi world will really accept ETH versus Bitcoin. If we'll see the same sort of level as demand, let's say, as the digital oil narrative versus Bitcoin's digital gold narrative. How are you feeling about that going into the ETH ETF, James? Do you think it matters? Firstly, short term, there's a lot of different takes about, we will dump if this doesn't go well, or we will absolutely rip if this goes well. Do you think it's, again, that's slightly noise? And secondly, yeah.
Two things. One, it's not going to be anywhere near the size of the Bitcoin ETF. The flows will be maybe 15%, I estimate. And the second issue is the Ethereum Grayscale Trust unwind. We're going to see the exact same playbook roll out like we did with Grayscale, dumping nearly 60% of their bags. They started on beginning of the year, 621,000 Bitcoin, and now they got 280,000. So think of the speculators as well. The same players are in the ETH ETF from Grayscale. They will be unwinding their trade probably pretty quickly. So there will be some sell pressure, which will impact ETH. But I think, again, it's not going to be, the people who love their ETH think it's going to be a huge game changer. I think it's going to take time to flush out the Grayscale selling first. And the flows will not be as big, anywhere near as big as the Bitcoin flows.
Yeah, I think it's really just working out what is priced in here, because I think everyone agrees that it's going to be a much smaller and probably a longer process of inflows than it was for Bitcoin. At Bitcoin, it felt like there were a bunch of different people chomping at the bit to get involved in the Bitcoin ETF. ETH, it feels as though a lot of asset managers just haven't really caught up to even what ETH is at this stage. Whereas Bitcoin, it feels like that story had been told and people were ready to invest. They just didn't have the product. ETH, it feels like it's going to be a longer, more drawn out process. I do think just the idea that there is a readily available investment product in the US, and you start to see more and more asset managers push for diversification away from just stocks and bonds. The idea that you have an ETH ETF will mean that some form of allocation goes there, even from the major asset managers. But I do think it will be relatively slower. I've said before, I think we probably end up in the low billions of inflows, net inflows, even including some of the Grayscale exits. But I think that will definitely disappoint versus the Bitcoin ETF. I think we're talking about fractions here, like 5 to 10%, rather than, let's say, 20 to 30%. What do you think about the CTO? I know ETH has outperformed for a while going into this. It's underperformed today and really kind of fallen out of bed, I would say, to a certain extent. What are the charts and what do you feel about ETH going into that event?
Yeah, it's kind of, if I share the screen again here, if you can bring it up.
Hang on, end of stage, there you go.
So the fascinating thing with Ethereum is that nothing has happened for half a year. Absolutely nothing. It's in exactly the same range. It faked out 3 times, twice on the upside, once on the downside, then it just came back. And it's like nothing, as if nothing has happened, despite all this dramatic news, over the half year, nothing has happened in the chart. This is the ETH to BTC chart, which I think makes it much easier to isolate what is happening with Ethereum specifically. Because if you look at the Ethereum to USD chart, it looks really great, but that's mostly just because Bitcoin has gone up. So if we isolate Ethereum individually, not much has happened. So for this to really change and become something else than just a big nothing burger, it needs to break out. And this was the resistance, but now since it faked out twice, maybe need to break up this level. But it's not very far from here. So I don't see it yet. There's nothing kind of proving that this has really changed direction at this point. It needs to do much more than this. I would have actually have guessed that this would have completely broken out and be full out bull market. ETF is coming to Ethereum, but it hasn't. It really hasn't. It's just been a big nothing burger. And if we remember what happened with BTC when it actually launched, was that it actually dumped. It ran up until the point of the trading start, but then when it actually started trading, it almost immediately dumped quite a bit because, not much happened, even though inflows actually followed later. Yeah. So perhaps that would be my base case, that something similar happens. It kind of builds up some anticipation. Then on the launch day, not much happens. People get disappointed. It backs up. And only after that, we will see what actually will happen. Will there come real inflows like it did with Bitcoin and not just moving money from Grayscale into the ETFs or something? Will there be real inflows? If that actually starts, well, then this should break out on the upside and we should see a different kind of chart than we have seen during the past half year. So that's what I'm looking at. And there's no really need to predict what's going to happen. These are very small price movements here. I'm just going to wait and see how this actually plays out. And if it actually changes, upside could be pretty big here, but we don't know that yet.
Yeah, it's definitely causing the most arguments, I think, on the timeline I see. Like, people having very different reactions to what we will see on the back of this. My personal view is that we'll probably see Bitcoin dominance head to closer towards 60% in and around that first week, just as it slightly disappoints, because we're all kind of saying. But I do think that ETH, this is a good story for ETH over the medium term. Just having this product, I think, is different than the majority of other crypto. And I do think, like I've said several times, that this allows for 3 strong narratives, I think, in crypto for ETH, Bitcoin, and Solana. So I think this is great. If you just take a step back, I just think it's been a really, really good period for crypto here. I think part of the lack of reaction is probably because people had well-flagged knowledge that we were going to see these sort of huge supplies of Bitcoin. That, to be honest, I don't think I definitely didn't see the German government coming in to sell. That's for certain. And I think that partly probably makes up for the lack of reaction that we've seen to positive news over the last few months. One piece of very positive news that we've seen this week was on Solana.
I do want to cover one thing before we move to Solana, and this is, people are talking about crashes and crashing and everything else, and I think one thing that is crashing is the Japanese yen, and it's pretty alarming for those that know what this actually means. And this all ties into what we spoke about with money printing. Like, the US is nearly 35 trillion in debt, 1.5 trillion in interest payments, which is a monstrous amount of payments. But the yen is experiencing a massive decline against the dollar and other major currencies. And it's the lowest since nearly 35 years, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the primary driver behind this is, of course, the widening interest rate gap between the yen and the dollar. And you've got, I think, Dylan Leclerc's firm now, they borrowed at 0.5% to buy Bitcoin in a fiat currency that is literally in the toilet. And they've, as an example, what I mean by this is coming to a fiat near you soon is everybody is, all these countries around the world, they have a very accommodative monetary policy. There's lots of money printing, stealth or otherwise, and it's going to hit the US too. And it ties back to why would anybody hold this fiat stuff? and the US has so much debt denominated in dollars. Its strategy to manage it going forward is debt deflation. There's no stopping the debt spiral, but debt deflation is critical for them going forward. And that's what's just going to happen. I just want to make sure we covered off on that point because it is very, very important with what's going on in the macro right now.
Yeah, I think that links back to the liquidity point that we were talking about before. With the move in this yen, I think the Japanese government or the BOJ came out even today and said, we are prepared to intervene in currency markets 24/7. And they already have sold tens of trillions of US treasuries so far. So it's very similar to the trade that we just said before. They are going to come in and they're going to sell a bunch of US treasuries, and the US government's going to have to work out a way to use this FEMA repo facility basically just to print more dollars. So you can get scared about, $1 billion or 2 billion or 3 billion or 4 billion Bitcoin coming out from Mt. Gox or from the German government. If the Fed prints hundreds of billions of liquidity, just think about global assets as, I know it's weird to say, but it's just like a pyramid, and Bitcoin's at the top of that, and it goes into bonds, then stocks, then right at the top is Bitcoin, and on top of that is altcoins. If the top starts getting printed money, it'll all just start flowing up. So yeah, you can just take a step back and be like, yes, we could have a bit of a choppy period here, but at the end of the day, we are only heading towards more liquidity. So you don't have to get too scared around things like Bitcoin, which hedge against that.
Yeah, and one thing to remember too, maybe Mando and CTO, you can shed some light on this just for the audience to understand. Imagine, Mando, you're People's Bank of China. CTO, you're the European Central Bank, and I'm the Fed. I'm looking at you, Mando. You're printing like crazy, and so is your neighbor Japan printing like crazy. European Central Bank, it knows they have issues. They cut rates already. They are also stealth printing and easing in different ways. The US is doing a lot of that too. If we are three different central banks, why wouldn't we all race to the bottom and print as fast as each other?
Well, I guess you're starting to see, I already said this, I think we're heading towards one of the biggest easing, at least falls in interest rate that we've seen in decades. We have high interest rates versus inflation here, or at least reported inflation in many different countries. And the only reason they've kind of remained high is because the Fed has kept theirs high. But now you're starting to see more and more of them have to kind of capitulate to this. So I do think, we're going to see an increase in liquidity here. H2, I think it's kind of a given that's going to happen. And therefore, the best asset to own is the hardest asset in the world, which is Bitcoin. And it just feels like that's kind of a no-brainer that will win in this scenario, even if you have this kind of short-term chop, or you have the technicals which kind of get in the way of that. So yeah, all kind of the same trade here is that it is starting to look increasingly like Japan is an issue, both from a currency standpoint and a banking standpoint, and there's going to have to be a fix there where the US prints dollars. So yeah, we will go into Solana here then. So that was one of the biggest pieces of news of the week. They are pushing through a ZK roll-up, basically improvement on the L1 layer. There was some debate about it was kind of L1 or L2 tech. We could see 5,000 to 10,000 improvements in scale and in cost on Solana. A huge upgrade here, which kind of happened in stealth well before Firedancer was meant to be coming. And I think very few people knew it was coming, because it was, like I said, it was done in stealth, because arguably this could be taken by other, or at least this technology could be replicated by other blockchains. What did you make of this, James? This does again point to the idea that Solana is the fastest, cheapest blockchain, and that's kind of where a lot of activity is going to happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It already was the fastest, cheapest, but this ZK compression, which got a lot of ETH people upset because I think they're stealing their vernacular, that came out, and you mentioned it is 99%, 99.9% reduction in cost, which is huge. Also, 1,000x increase in potential speed too. So that's just part of it. We'll get into that in a minute and maybe ask CTO some technical questions. But then there was a new Canadian ETP ETF launching coming soon. They have also solved the problem of the gaming, which is, we spoke about gaming last week, is something I know very little about, but they have a new SVM that has like 50 millisecond latency, which is plenty for a game. They have a new node client. They've got a new thing against malicious MEV. They have a new feature which is designed to adopt people to crypto without actually having to go through the pain of setting up a wallet. They got a new USD sends without wallets, just using email.
Yeah, with emails. That was crazy. I saw that.
Which I've tested too, and new smart wallets. But the compression thing is really huge. It solves the biggest pain point faced by institutions and mass consumer applications, and that is the cost of on-chain account storage. And this compression, means if you have a business that has, say, 500 million customers, and you want to put them on the blockchain with NFTs or tokens of some sort, you can now service 500 million customers with a cost of just 25,000. That is kind of a big game changer. But there's a few other things too. If I can pull them up here, there was a great chart kind of explaining how this new compression works, put together by DeFi Banked. I thought it was hilarious because the simple story is people don't understand it, okay? Because people are stuck in a world where they believe, L2s are, how do I describe it? There's so much confusion. If you're stuck in, and we've gone back and forth about this for a long time, when you're stuck in a modular world, it's hard to unsee it and understand the monolithic approach. And this is true compression without any of the L2 drawbacks. I think Tony totally said that as well. And it's very mind-bending. And the confusion is, it's like an L2, but without the drawbacks of an L2, without actually being an L2. And this is what is confusing the heck out of everybody right now. So it is a game changer. What's even more stunning is the fact that this is happening before FireDancer. Okay, so the only issue we have right now is how do you onboard that billion users? So you need really good dApps with really good product market fit, really good games, really good payment mechanisms, really good DEXs, really good DPIN capabilities. And now they have the scale. And I know people will be in the audience that hold other tokens, say, but decentralization. Well, it's a lot more decentralized than technically on a Nakamoto basis than ETH, and that is Solana. Nakamoto coefficient is 22 versus Ethereum is now 2 because you just need to control AWS and one other player, and then you've got half the control. Maybe CTO, you can shed some light on the true decentralization, what it does take to actually control a chain. But this is super exciting. Again, the adoption is the key, and that's the next stage right now. And they're doing all the right things all at the same time before FireDancer. So one other thing as well. I think I had one chart. Let me pull this up. I'm going back and forth with a guy called Fred Krueger. So he loves his power law. And, I like to break things down. I've got 3 separate Bitcoin Metcalfe's law models. And I'm in the middle of updating them and configuring them as well for other chains. So if you imagine one chain has 50 million wallets, okay, most of which are dormant and have been moved in 10 years plus, and the other chain has 30 million monthly active users, where would you place more value? That's my theoretical question. CTO, what do you think about
that? What do you think about this, CTO?
Yeah, if I can share the screen here. I think actually it's very interesting. I've been reading up on the concept of this compression today, and I mean I think it is pretty good. Of course, these are kind of marketing statements, but I think it's largely correct that it costs. I mean, Solana is cheap, but there's still quite a lot of money. They took an example here, an airdrop to 1 million users would cost $260,000, and now it's 50. So they kind of that's the fun thing here. It's like a cost saving similar to an L2. And Toli here, co-founder Solana Labs, I think it was a very funny reply because someone said that, but it's like an L2. They built an L2. But then he's saying, sure, it's an L2, but it doesn't require a Security Council multisig, and users don't need to switch chain IDs. It doesn't need a governance token, doesn't need an external sequencers, and Solana validators still get all the transaction fees. So, I mean, that is kind of true, and it's what I've said here a long time. What I don't like with the L2s is that it's kind of user friction. There's so much work to do this bridging, and it's kind of complicated, and you don't see it in MetaMask. And it was only really with Base that a user experience is there to kind of make it user friendly. This, in a way, if they actually get this working, this is better from a user experience perspective. You don't need to go on another chain. You just get cheaper transactions by quite a lot. And then you can always debate then, is this like decentralized as well, or is there some other drawback? But fact is that most people don't care. As long as it's working, it's permissionless, and it's cheap, that is good enough for 99.9% of people. They don't really care about the drawbacks as long as it's working. So I think this is a very good move. I'm kind of impressed. I didn't see this coming. Actually, I didn't know they were working on this really. And I mean, if they get it working, that's a big if. Perhaps, in the end, it's like, actually, it didn't work, guys. There was this problem we didn't think about. That can always be the case. What is also interesting is that we don't see this reflected in the price at all. This was kind of a big, at least coming upgrade, hopefully. But nothing is happening in the price. But it hasn't broken down either. I talked on this DCA show quite a few times that the level that I'm watching is 0.002 on the SOL to BTC chart. It touched again today, but it hasn't broken down there yet. It's still holding. And similarly on the USD chart, we're kind of right at the last defense. If this red line here breaks at, 127, that's not good, because this level here rejected, trend is turning down. But I think that you're just seeing mostly what Bitcoin is doing on the SOL to USD chart. It's easier to isolate the product itself, partly separated from the speculative action on the SOL to BTC chart, and that support is still holding. That's the only support that matters at this point. But I think I wanted to show this one also because something has changed here. This is the SOL to ETH chart, and SOL has had the clear dominance in every single way: parabola, trend, chart pattern, every single way. But then it kind of started hesitating here. Price went into this range, and then it broke on the downside with a trend down. So there is a change. Like Ethereum has relatively gotten the initiative a little bit here, and now it's up for proof. Can Ethereum follow through on that with the ETF launch, or will it turn into a nothing burger? So, I mean, here we see nothing. This was a big event for me, actually. This technical development, if they actually get it working, it's a big event, and it seems like the market hasn't understood it or noticed it at all, because it's not at all reflected in the chart. So I think that SOL could be an opportunity here. If someone has been looking, if you missed the entries from way back, if this support holds, if it keeps holding and doesn't break down now and kind of risks are increasing a little bit in the market, that could be a decent risk reward, because it's short distance to invalidation, so you don't risk so much on the downside. So I'm pretty interested here. I think this is a kind of an opportunity perhaps in the market, which we haven't seen since Solana really broke out here at around $20. That was the start of this whole move. We talked about it here, James, you and I, on the channel. I've talked about it on many channels. So that was kind of an opportunity. Perhaps if this whole support is holding now and doesn't break down the next coming days, could be another opportunity.
I thought this was interesting because, firstly, it's like what you said. They didn't do a token. Like often when you see these sort of upgrades happen, particularly on modular chains, this will be its own token, maybe a DAO, which controls this piece of technology, which improves the roll up, and they've just decided to just have it on the L1, go full monolithic with it, which I thought was was kind of great just to see these sort of benefits, and you don't see this sort of VC came in and built this tech and there was some sort of weird token that came on the back of it. It's just been an improvement to Solana in itself. And then secondly, I thought it was important because, to be honest, there were some blockchains coming up which were starting to potentially even or claim that they would start to threaten Solana's current TPS. Things like Phantom was coming to come out with Sonic, which is kind of going to be in the same sort of range as Solana. To then have this, again, step change in increase it in cost or reduction in cost and increase in scalability just kind of puts it in this unassailable lead now when it comes to being fast and cheap, which is kind of what Solana needs to be, even before Firedancer. So it just feels like it's got a really strong defensible moat now for the foreseeable future, in my opinion, with that narrative. That being said, Solana has not been a good performer. You know, it is down 30-40% over the last few weeks. And I think people are kind of scratching their head, particularly to the reaction to this exact piece of news, because you would have assumed that would create a bounce, which I guess getting people a little bit scared. You have the ETH ETF coming, which is taking a lot of the narrative, at least for kind of L1s. And then just as all altcoins have fallen, I think Solana's been dragged into that fall as well. So,
and in fairness, Mando, altcoins got slaughtered across the board.
They got slaughtered,
this is one of the least worst. Okay, so everything got hammered badly.
So I think it's been a bit of a I know, head scratcher, but at the same time, like I said, I like the stories about all three of them right now. Solana's, to me, still feels like the one with the most upside, just because I think they're doing things which are going to make it kind of, like I said, unassailable in some of these things. So I still like that story, but I do see the strong stories in ETH and Bitcoin here. One thing that has imploded in that implosion of altcoins has been the meme coin sector. So, and this was largely happening on Solana, which perhaps makes the sell-off and makes the underperformance, let's say, more clear. So you've seen things like WIF, which is kind of the number one meme coin in Solana, has dropped around 50% over the last 2 weeks. Similarly, that's happened to Bonk, and all the low to mid-cap memes have all really seen huge drops. So a lot of value destruction, I would say, in the meme coin streets on Solana. It does feel as though people are starting to question whether that is kind of the short-term top for the meme coin cycle, and we will move on to other sectors, let's say, which will drive the market. But I think that's probably also part of the reason for the Solana underperformance. You've seen people who are speculating on there every single day. Although DEX volumes have stayed relatively high, you've seen those volumes reduce materially, and that's meant that people have just kind of turned off from value creation on Solana. Do you think that we're going to find a new narrative for Solana soon, James? I know you're bullish on DeepIn potentially picking up from where meme coins were for Solana. One of the benefits of being fast and cheap is that you can pick up a new narrative relatively quickly.
Yeah, I think DeepIn is actually huge. These are some of the DeepIn plays. And of course, a lot of people think, well, DeepIn, it's really nothing. I think DeepIn has the potential to be as big as DeFi because of the real world use cases that can be pivoted on. And for people who don't know, DeepIn is decentralized physical infrastructure networks. It's real world applications of blockchain. So if you have an idea, a business, a project, instead of building your own blockchain, you can just use somebody else's. And right now, there's some really well adopted plays going on board. And now the total market cap of this whole space, just these select names you're looking at here, is over 4 billion on Solana. Names like Render, AI play. You got Shadow Storage, Helium, which is like phone, decentralized telecommunications, IONET, another AI play, Hive Mapper, where they're trying to compete with Google, mapping the whole world, etc. It's really an interesting space. Nobody's really focusing on it, thinking about it. And in full disclosure, I own quite a few of these names and have done for quite some time, like Render, Nosana, etc. I think it's... And also, the real magical thing is it'll only work in a chain that's fast and cheap. That's it. You can't have a Hive mapper running around the world mapping all the roads on the planet. I think they've mapped something like 1/3 of the roads on the planet already without a cheap blockchain. So, CTO Mando, do you guys look at this space at all?
I do. I mean, I know Helium very well. I know they have a mobile plan in the US, and the one that people have been super bullish on is Hive Mapper as like a replacement for Google Maps as well. The one I saw this week, which really interested me, was Teleport. I don't know if you saw this, which was
Uber.
decentralized Uber, which people are getting very, very bullish on. The idea for ride hailing that you wouldn't have a centralized entity, that you could just do it between yourself and the driver, and that the drivers would get paid a lot more, and you would also get a cheaper ride. So I think this app went live in Austin around Consensus this year, which is one of the major crypto conferences. And they had a bunch of different drivers driving around using the Teleport app instead of Uber. And everyone was raving about it, being like, it's good for users, it's good for drivers. You just cut out the middleman and everyone makes more here. So that's kind of how Deepin works. It's kind of this idea of cutting out the middleman. Let's say for Hive Mapper, you're cutting out Google Maps, for example. For Helium, you're cutting out many of the different mobile providers, and you get a more equitable distribution of returns, I would say, to both the user and the operator. So yeah, I do think this could be huge. The tokens are always a little bit difficult because similarly to a lot of these tokens, they have terrible tokenomics of it. Like you just never really know if you're going to get dumped on by forever. But I do think the idea of blockchain technology powering these sort of things is super interesting.
Yeah. CTO, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we actually tried to kind of do this. What was it? Must be like 15 years ago, 20 years ago or something now, in the telecom space. So we built kind of a small base station, and the idea was that people should place them themselves and kind of manage it instead of a central authority building them, because you presumably would place them in better locations than where you actually need coverage and so on. So
you built Helium 15 years ago. That's amazing.
We built this product and everything, and it kind of worked actually. There is like, so I do understand the dynamic of this idea pretty well, I would say. The thing is that there has to be some inherent advantage with doing it this way, because doing anything centrally is going to be faster because you have one person taking decision. You don't need to reach consensus with like 1,000 people. So it's going to be faster decisions. You're going to get some scale advantage of some kind that you don't get if you do kind of splitting it up. And presume so you get like speed by doing it centrally. You get faster speed, probably. You might get lower cost, and because you have the scale advantage. So there has to be something else for this to work. It has to be like that. Idea of many of these is that the resource is idle anyway. You're anyway not using it. So why not resell it? Why not resell your GPU that is anyways with doing nothing 99% of the time? Why not kind of pool that and use it of some kind? Otherwise, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that it's going to be better just because you're sharing in like a big community of like-minded people. That's not enough. There has to be an inherent cost advantage, like you're using resources which are otherwise idle. But then, is that enough? Like, will it compete with the centrally procured NVIDIA server park or something, and like scale, because maybe your GPU is less efficient or something like that? So that's how I'm looking at these projects, and I love the idea. But they have to kind of overcome these challenges, that they will be inherently slower in decision making than a centralized authority trying to do the same thing. I think that's why.
In fact, I would argue different, CTO. Imagine getting an Ericsson or a T-Mobile to move and make a decision. They move at the speed of molasses. These blockchains, these organizations running on a blockchain, they don't have to worry about that. They can decide, okay, I'm going to open up, say, the London market tomorrow, and then go to Zimbabwe the next day or whatever like that for decentralized Uber ride sharing. I mean, the speed of this is incredible. And also, we're going to a world where everything's going to be on the blockchain and the tokenization of everything. I think this space is perfectly positioned for the revolution that's coming. I wouldn't say they're slower at all.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed one of these projects 5 years ago, and they had all the components. And in the end, 5 years has passed. Not much has really happened.
Blockchain
While
was not ready 5 years ago.
Elon Musk can say, guys, I'm going to launch a cheaper version of the Starlink, and I'm launching it tomorrow, and it's online already. And then I'm setting up like all the factories to produce them, and boom, it's out. And because it's like centrally controlled, and one person can take perhaps faster decision. But so I agree, and I would love for this to work 100%. And I do think that the industry will work. But say Filecoin, that was maybe one of the first to kind of realize this idea. Now it's like, when did they launch? 2017, something like that.
Yeah,
didn't really outcompete Google Cloud Storage or AWS and so on. So there
but I would argue the blockchains were not ready, not fast enough, not mature enough, and cheap enough.
I would say the issue about this sort of stuff is really quality. So like people like that removal of the middleman, but they get worried about the quality of service. So there was a good comment there, which is just like, well, it works if you have safe drivers, but can you guarantee safety, customer service, quality with these sort of decentralized programs? I think you probably have to give up a certain extent of that to want to use these. Like, I don't know Helium, but I can imagine that that's where people have issues with them. You know, like we're scared about quality of service, we're scared about customer service, and that would be the same for if you had a decentralized, Uber, let's say. Who are you going to call if something goes wrong, or your ride's bad? Or people do like that level of centralization to a certain extent. So I think that's where the main thing is. I do think we're at the stage now where we have the infrastructure. Everyone keeps saying this in crypto, like we don't need more infrastructure. Like, it's great that Solana got to more speed, but what we really need is apps. We need people to actually start using this technology. And Deepin does feel like that. But I think the main tripping over is going to be just consistency in quality and in customer service, which people get they're just not sure about. Like, would you quit your Vodafone or your, Ericsson membership and go in and get Helium? Would you quit Google Maps to go into Hive Map? I don't know, because it's difficult to work out the quality of these things over a long period. I think
I tell you a fun story. I actually have a Helium phone. It's the Saga phone, and I pay $20 a month for the package as a burner backup. And I have another phone, but truth be told, I don't use either. I don't answer my phone. So I think phone is dead, literally. So it's just not worth answering anymore. So, but it's nice to have a device that's a wallet. That's really impressive. And, the world is going towards mobile. CTO's world totally mentioned that as well over the weekend. He wants to incentivize developers to build everything on mobile, because guess how you onboard 1 billion users? Not with laptops and iPads. It's with cell phones, mobile devices, smartphones. And that's the way it's all going, where you can do everything. Your integrated wallet, your DEXs, you're trading NFTs, you're playing video games, everything on the mobile device. So the world is going to change very quickly. And that's what I kind of warn people. And I know you both see the same thing. 2 years from now, everything will be mobile, everything will be AI driven, everything will be decentralized, tokenized, etc. Maybe not 2 years, but 3 years for sure. A lot will be.
Well, let's get into that for maybe the finals.
Can I just clarify one thing? I love the narrative. I think that many of the projects with this narrative, I think they will do fantastic over the next periods as well, just as they like Render Network has done, for example. So absolutely, I believe it. And I mean, it's perhaps sometimes when you know something really well, you see all the problems, but most other people won't, and it doesn't matter in the end. Perhaps they 5 years later, 10 years later, they of course adjusted and found some solution to all this. So I love the narrative. I think it's fantastic, and I agree that I think it will perform very well.
I think people are still drawn. Like, I don't know many services which are completely decentralized or have decentralized networks running them. People are still drawn to centralized companies for quality and also brands. They like to be part of brands and that sort of stuff. So I still think it's going to be a bit of a leap, but we'll see. Like, you do have certain things like, I know, open source technology which have worked quite well. But in terms of actual services, it's very few which are like completely decentralized like this. So let's see how it develops. You were just touching upon the step changes that we're going to see in the world over the next few years. The SoftBank CEO came out this week and says we're headed to super intelligence for AI. AI super intelligence is going to be coming in the next 10 years. This has now been a narrative which has really picked up over the last couple of weeks. You had the launch of the new Claude AI system this week, which arguably is going to challenge ChatGPT. And you've seen seemingly big step changes in LLM, but particularly this concept of AI superintelligence, which could just change the whole world. Again, we were talking about quadrillion sort of industries here. What do you make of this? Now, we've obviously seen Nvidia hit an all-time high. We've seen AI still rocket in the last week. Nvidia briefly became the most valuable company in the world, although it's since retraced slightly. This is a huge trend, James. Like, what did you make of this?
Well, AGI will be mature in 2 years, 2025, 2026. Elon Musk said that there is only one real true version of AGI in the world running around today, and that's FSD on Tesla. It's one of the reasons I'm very, very bullish in that. And the pace of change will be 1600x better in 2 to 3 years. So the planet civilization has never faced such a revolution before. Forget steam engines and fire and all that stuff. This is way beyond next level. We're talking multiple step changes. I totally believe in this. The question is, what happens to the humans? And when you have machines that are not only far more intelligent, far faster, far cheaper, and that's what kind of has me concerned, and I've been concerned about this since 2022. And CTO, we've had many conversations about this. I absolutely believe it. 10 years, I think, could be a little bit far off. I think we could get there a lot sooner.
Wow, you think AGI sooner than 10 years?
AGI in 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
ASI, sorry.
ASI fast. Remember, the pace of learning is exponential. The cost of inference is falling, and learning is falling dramatically as the machinery gets better and better. It's so hard to estimate what's going to happen next. It's like the old joke is, if you are looking through a telescope at a different universe, if you're off by a fraction of 1 degree, you're in a totally separate universe. That's how hard it is to estimate where all this space is going. All I can advise people, although we don't give advice, is have exposure to it, because it's coming fast.
This is changing the world so much, everyone. I mean, if you're positioned in your professional life at the wrong side here, you better do something about it sooner rather than later, because this is a very smart gentleman. If you're not aware of SoftBank CEO, of course they made huge mistakes, but they do put big money behind what they believe in. And SoftBank CEO is basically saying that he will dedicate the rest of his life and company to try to realize this. So that is one more person who's putting big bucks behind this. And what he's saying is then that the AGI is not that far away, and it can kind of reach then be better than an individual human person with up to 10x factor. But then from there, it's not so far to get from 10 times to 10,000 times. And that is mathematically, factually correct. If you can get to the first point, can absolutely get to the second point, because 1,000x factor, that's just doubling it by approximately 10 times. So, and that is absolutely possible. I mean, given the current amount of investment into AI, which will improve both algorithms, and then, the chips gets faster and cheaper by themselves also every year. So I think that doubling every year in capacity is not unrealistic. Also, more money goes in, so you can kind of build more chips. And because usefulness goes up. So doubling every year, 10 years in a row, is not at all unrealistic. And that means that in 10 years, it will get 1,000 times better. So if we can get to the first 10x, we will absolutely get to the 10,000 times more intelligent 10 years later than that. And what does that mean for jobs and everything? There will be massive disruption, massive disruption. But there are still some things that AI can't really do, probably, like because there is no precedence, and it's kind of you can't really predict the future to that extent. If you ask ChatGPT today, will NVIDIA be replaced as the #1 company making profit from AI? And if so, what other company will replace it? ChatGPT won't know. And the other AI won't know either, because no one knows, and the collective intelligence of all humans can't figure it out either. We don't know that for sure. So there will be some things that it can't do. It can't predict the future because it's like stochastic events and so on. But a lot of what is today considered high-value jobs, I think, will be replaced, and sooner rather than later. So, everyone watching, think about your job. Will it get replaced? Yeah, then maybe think what else you will do instead.
Yeah, I mean, the main limiting factors here, it seems to be things like energy that we need to solve for to even get to these sort of levels. Kind of the amount of different AIs that you actually have running this sort of stuff. But yeah, the people are scared about this. Why arguably they brought in like universal basic income, because they wanted to protect a world where this kind of happens. If you have humans, no one can say they're going to be smarter than a human 10,000 times smarter than humans. So everyone's going to be, quote unquote, potentially slaves to this sort of thing. So it is something to be wary of, I think, at the same time. And like you said, this guy is a serious guy. Like, he runs SoftBank, which is the SoftBank Vision Fund's been one of the biggest VC investors of the last 10 years, although they've obviously made some huge errors. But they also, I think, are the biggest holder of ARM, which is the second best performer in the NASDAQ after NVIDIA this year. So he obviously does know what he's talking about here. And yeah, this sort of world could be interesting.
In fact, the ARM investment completely made up for all some of the losses they made in the past 3 or 4 years. It was huge. And now they're all in on AI. And they have a lot of money. Lot of money. I mean, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. So.
Yeah, he similarly did something with this. This is what happened in the .com bubble. He similarly got a bunch of zeros and ended up being saved by Alibaba. This looks like ARM's going to save him. Maybe some other things as well in their portfolio. But you have very, very serious people moving towards this. We had NVIDIA become the most valuable company in the world at the moment. James, I'll just throw it to you for maybe the last question. But out of these, of Tesla, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, they've all come up with new AI models, or AI. They're going to benefit from this AI trend over the next few years. Which one are you currently looking at most interested?
I think it's no secret, but I'm very heavy into Tesla. I believe Tesla are very well positioned. The future is autonomy, which is self-driving cars and other vehicles, eVTOLs, etc., as well as robots to supplant, human productivity, etc. They have the best brain. They've got the best manufacturing prowess. They have built everything from the ground up on their Optimus bot. People say, well, there's 20 other bot players. There's only one with the actual capacity scale, $650 billion market cap, factories all over the world. And they're focusing now on data centers. And one of the things that's super interesting about Tesla too, it's priced, it's underwritten as a car maker. And it's an AI autonomy bot maker with SaaS revenue. When that repricing, re-underwriting happens, it's going to be a very fun time to be in a position. And
did you look at ARM? Have you looked at ARM?
I have, yes. I've analyzed them. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
So I'm not big into designers. I like vertically integrated chains. So that's kind of where it falls flat. Plus, you're up. ARM was up against Nvidia. I think Nvidia have a leg up on them. And in full disclosure, I do still own Nvidia, so that was kind of my bet.
Right, makes sense. What did you make of this, CTO? I know even Apple came out with its Apple Intelligence, which people got very bullish on even this week. But are there any of these that you thought is going to be a leader here if we start to see super intelligence AI?
Yeah, if I can share the screen again. So I think if we're asking for opportunities today, the entries in 3 of these, they were not now. Like the last entry in Nvidia was here. That was like textbook inverse head and shoulder, trend turned back up. But that was like a 22. Price now is 120. And like waking up now and trying to chase after it and so on, it's very risky. Where would you put the stop and so on? It is not good from a trading perspective. Similarly with Microsoft, it has been in this uptrend and textbook coming now and thinking, great, I'm going to buy now 449. Okay, but the entry was kind of down here. Similarly with Apple, honestly. So there's only, if we're kind of waking up now and trying to find some entry after all this run up, there's only one which is kind of sitting right on support and could present entries, and that is actually Tesla. So I'm very interested in this also. If this support is holding, which it seems to do, and this starts moving up again, I'm interested exactly for those reasons James said. Tesla has not performed well the past 2 years. It's been very different from all the other tech companies. And that kind of confirmed, it broke a head and shoulders here, which dipped it below 100 in today's prices. But now it's kind of situation starts to change again. So I'm monitoring this support. I would be interested in some new Tesla entries, not because of the cars. Honestly, I think they should ditch the core physical products. It's a very difficult business model in competition with Chinese and other companies. I think they should focus on the AI and the fleet management and, I don't know, go all in on that. But perhaps it's a blessing if they're valued as a car maker, but actually an AI company.
And that's exactly what they're doing. So an interesting math piece on that, Elon Musk is going full in onto robotaxis and bots. A fleet of 1 million robotaxis will generate about 17 billion in operating income, which is more than double the annual income. And of course, from there they can scale. And he mentioned numbers like 100 million robotaxis around the world. And there's many countries that actually need these things. And if people have a choice of getting into a car with nobody that's autonomous and safe versus sharing a car with a driver, etc., and having to talk, and it's going to be a lot cheaper. And that's just the cyber taxi. The real opportunity is robots too. So do you
know if Elon Musk has said at any point that the AI will be in the Tesla company, or is there a risk here that suddenly it's like in another company? He has a lot of companies, right?
Yeah, that's a 3D chess move. So what he did was to hedge the comp plan. He basically built XAI on the outside. So he has a hedge if somebody tries to kind of overtake Tesla because of some of the activism that is out there in the world. I think this is his hedge to play it safe, create more of a brain on the outside of actually Tesla that they can roll in time. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. And all of his companies collaborate together. There's so much synergy between SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company and you name it.
He is being sued though, right? I think I saw another lawsuit last week, which is for this exact thing, that XAI may have been diverting. I mean, he gets sued every 5 minutes, but he's been. I did see an investor lawsuit against the idea that he's diverting resources away from one to the other. So
he to
a certain extent, I think.
Yeah, he had a lot of H100s that were being delivered, but he had nowhere to set them up. So rather than sit, unused in a warehouse, he pivoted them to another business, which is part of the synergy that few actually understand. So anyway, it's a tricky situation.
For sure. It's definitely a political mess, though. Still, either way, look, I think that was a great show. I think we've rounded up everything. Bitcoin is is down about $500 while we've been doing this talk. So still sitting around that 60K support level. Solana 126, ETH 3277. Actually, ETH is underperformed slightly again. But let's see where we are next week. Hopefully we maintain this support on Bitcoin. And thanks a lot, gents. We'll be back next week for more across crypto and macro and AI.
Thank you so much as well. And we're all on each other's channels, but I have links for these channels below and the Mando newsletter and CTO's channel as well. And thank you as well to the audience for coming. And thank you for moderating, Mando. And good to see you again, CTO.
Yeah.
Have a great week.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye, guys. See you next week.